Hey everybody, welcome back to Wild Vittles. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different than what we have done previously, in that I'm not going to be cooking in this episode. I'm actually talking to Cary Beason of the Salty Yak Podcast. He invited me over to his podcast. We're friends. He is listening to my podcast. He's my podcast mentor, and he's going to interview me about Wild Vittles and my background and what I'm trying to achieve and get some tips and tricks as well. So let's fade over to that, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Hey, welcome everybody to the Salty Yak Outdoor Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Cary Beason, and today with me is my friend, Chris Smith.
Hello, and thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, this is the way I was counting it up earlier, third time?
It is. We had we had one at a BHA Pint Night, and then we came to talk about a beach access legislation.
Correct. So we are not necessarily talking about BHA today.
No.
We are actually talking about a new endeavor that you've started, and I found it really exciting, and I just like talking to you.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And so we set this little thing up to talk about, well, there's no reason, as they say, bury the lead, right?
Right.
So we're going to talk about a lot of things, but probably all of it's going to at least center somewhat around your new podcast.
Yes, I have a new podcast called Wild Vittles. And for people that are like, what are vittles? You know, I did a little bit of a testing poll to see if people understood what that was. It's my understanding, it's an old cowboy slang, and people still say it where I'm from, and my wife and I still use that term for food. Mm-hmm. And so I hear people say, what kind of vittles are we going to whip up tonight? You know, and so I was looking for a title that would kind of, I don't know, be different and maybe catch people's attention. And I was also wanting the title to be short, you know, 2 words. So Wild Vittles to, kind of convey cooking wild game. And it's focused on that.
So you and your wife are from Oklahoma.
We are.
Yeah. So I can see where vittles would come in. I'm going to say, I'm a Texas boy. I knew when you sent it to me via text, you're like, do you know what this is? I'm like, oh yeah, I know what that is. Because your reference to the Beverly Hillbillies.
Yes.
Which not everybody's probably going to get.
That's a
but
bit.
We all knew that Granny. That's what Granny said.
Yeah, we're kind of dating ourselves since we were, we're a little older.
I find myself dating myself more and more. We were having the conversation up at the farm the other day with some of the youngsters.
Yep.
That did not remember ding dongs coming in aluminum foil.
You're kidding me.
No, some of them never saw a ding dong that was in aluminum foil.
Those ding dongs are probably still good too. They got so many preservatives in them.
They probably are, but I just, it's, and we were just talking about Apple Watches, right?
Yep.
You've got one. I don't. I'm a little resistant, but anyway.
Depends if you're just a techie dude at heart, but yeah, and I understand the reasons behind it.
Yeah.
But the second thing about vittles was too. Then what's the proper spelling? And I googled, there are 2 spellings: VIDD and VITTLES.
And you went with
the TTE because I believe that's correct, but
your wife would say different.
So we did a poll, and only my wife and Cody Weiss's wife, Samantha, voted for the other spelling.
I voted for the other because I believe I sent it to you. And you're like,
okay.
You and my wife are the only ones that spell it that way.
Well, I'll tell you that you have, a PhD geologist on your side. Cody's wife is extremely, well learned. So,
well, maybe if she was an English major or something.
No, entomology. Yeah, but yes, English language. But apparently, it comes from the word victuals, which is an older term for food.
Okay.
So
let's kind of back up here.
Yep.
How did Chris get into hunting and fishing?
Yeah. So as we just said, I'm from Oklahoma and actually grew up not necessarily on a farm, but in the farming and ranching kind of industry. I'll put it that way. So I'm from Southwest Oklahoma. My parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents are all farmers and ranchers from Oklahoma. We immigrated into Oklahoma before it was a state.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
Yeah, Oklahoma became a state in 1907. It's a fairly young state, and they've been there ever since. And so I grew up, they drug me out to the farm as soon as I could, and that's just what we did. We were mainly upland bird hunters. We did a lot of turkey hunting, dove hunting, of course, but quail hunting was king. That was the thing. And especially if you think back late 70s into the 80s, I didn't know it, but that was the boom. That was the prime time for quail hunting.
Yeah.
It was a big deal. And I didn't actually get into deer hunting. I had to call my wife and actually ask her, like, look on my deer mount and tell me what year it is, because I thought it was 85. And she said, no, it's 86. And that was my first rifle deer. And that was quite an unusual circumstance because we didn't have deer in the early 80s. Well, I remember vividly one year we were walking through a plum thicket in a river bottom, and I found, looking for quail, actually. Mm-hmm. And I found a shed antler, a small, what would have been an 8-point, well, half of it, so 4 points. And you would have thought I found Bigfoot's track. I showed my dad, my granddad. I was like, can you believe this? There's deer here? I mean, they were like lips on chickens. You just didn't see them, They were non-existent. So I think that was probably early 80s. And then we started to see a few around. And then in 86, I was like, I'm going to go down, and rifle season was only 6 days, I think. It was a very short season, gun season was. I told my dad, I want to go down and go rifle hunting for deer. And he goes, well, go knock yourself out, And I got on the three-wheeler and rode down there in my blaze orange puffy jacket and my blaze orange trooper cap. You know what those things are with the flaps that go down?
I do.
and a bucket. I sat on a 5-gallon bucket with my rifle at the end of kind of a tree row.
What kind of rifle?
It was a Model 7 Remington 243 caliber.
I was waiting for the 30-30, but anyway.
No. Yeah, I could see where you because that was very common, right? But 243 is what my dad started me out with because it was kind of the 6.5 Creedmoor of the day, right?
Exactly.
It was a smaller caliber, didn't kick too much, and this was a kind of youth model rifle. And I sat there all week and did not see anything until the last day. And the last day, I'm sitting at the end of this tree row, and a doe comes out. And I'm on the ground, for God's sake. What I know now is much different than what I knew then. And this doe walks by me about 10 yards and then just locks in on me and just is like, you don't belong here. Something's wrong. And I'm frozen and trying not to move, and she finally blows and runs off. And I'm like, well, that was my shot. Not that I could hunt a doe. It was a buck-only season. She runs off, and I'm like, I'm not going to see anything else. Well, within like 60 seconds, deer just started pouring out of this tree row, not like running. They were just grazing out. And there's all these does. And all of a sudden, there's this 10-point that just wanders out. And my heart is just, and I'm just like, oh, my God, this is my shot. This is my opportunity. And again, I'm sitting on a bucket, and I'm offhand, too. I didn't even think about a rest or anything like this because I was 13, 14 years old. And put up a rifle, squeeze, shot, boom. And, you kind of lose sight in the scope at the time. And I can see him running. And I'm like, oh, I must have missed. And I keep watching him. And I see him kind of, how they bound straight away? He was up in the air. He went down and didn't come back up. I'm like, oh, my God, I got him. And I ran over there after he was down. And he's a beautiful, wide as his ears, 10-point.
Wow.
Really beautiful deer. I called my dad on the old FM two-way radios, kind of like CBs. And I was like, you got to get down here. I got a deer. And he's like, you did what?
You did what? You killed what? He probably didn't think you were going to kill a deer at all.
He didn't tell me until actually a couple years ago. He goes, we really didn't think you were going to get one. He's like, he was really shocked. So, yeah. And I actually asked him on the spot. I was like, can I get it mounted? Can we do a shoulder mount? And he goes, yeah, that's a pretty good deer. So that was the start of my deer hunting career. But I have been into hunting and fishing all my life. And from the inception, I've never really been a sports guy. And it's really, I had land because we were farmers and we had a lot of resources to do that. So, and I've been shooting a bow, not hunting, but since I was probably 5.
Yeah. Sounds like we had a lot of the same, or a lot of similarities growing up.
Really?
Grew up out there on the farm.
Yeah.
Was no deer.
Yeah.
In 84, 85.
Yeah. And you're around here in Texas?
Well, Central Texas there around Rockdale.
Okay.
Where we still have the little piece of the family farm that we deer hunt on.
Yeah.
None.
Yeah.
And I remember the day that I looked out the front window of the house and there was a doe running across the pasture. And I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah.
Of course, it took us about another 10 years to start hunting deer around there.
Yeah.
But same thing. Grew up fishing.
Yep.
I think my first hunt with my dad was a squirrel hunt.
Yep.
But we never had a quail dog, but we would just walk the fence rows and shoot bobwhites. That's how many of them there were.
Wow.
And there ain't none no more.
No. They're around, but they're very few.
You got to really look. I mean, you can go up in the Panhandle, you go to West Texas, or you go to South Texas if you're looking for wild birds.
Yep.
But we did a lot of dove hunting too.
Yeah.
So it seems like we had,
Very
our
similar.
upbringing was very similar.
Yeah.
So where did your passion for, let's just say cooking,
Yeah.
where did your passion for cooking come from?
Well, it's related to hunting because there's kind of two pieces to it. So initially, I really love this hunting thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, it was very much, especially as a young boy growing up on a farm, there's this mentality that really I got from my grandfather, great-grandfather, is that, you grow potatoes, you eat potatoes. You raise things in the garden, you utilize them. And then every time we'd go turkey hunting, quail hunting, whatever the case may be, when we had cattle too, and we'd get calf fries, you know what those are, right?
Mountain oysters.
Yeah, absolutely. So we would utilize all of that, and it was just like natural, right? We didn't have a lot of exposure to deer because we didn't have deer, but everything else, quail was a delicacy that was prized by us, and we wanted to have that opportunity to be able to consume it. It was an equal part of the experience, and that's what I'm trying to achieve now. Is I think there's so much focus on the hunt.
Yes.
And there's just not a whole lot of focus after the animal hits the ground. Yeah, and I think there's a whole conversation there.
Yeah, we were talking about, before we turned on the microphones, in my view, there's not really anybody that's focused just on this.
Right.
Yeah, I've mentioned, and like I've talked about, we've mentioned a couple recipes on the podcast. And I told you that those have been I've got some really good feedback from people when we're talking about the recipes.
Yeah.
We all love to eat, right?
Yeah.
And if we're here, whether we're talking fishing or talking hunting, I'm all about finding out new ways and better ways to prepare what I'm catching and killing.
So to answer your question, if I'm going to get into this hunting thing, as a boy, and especially as a young adult, it was evident to me if I like to deer hunt, I've got to do something with this deer, right? You can't just put it in the freezer and then the next year go hunt again. So I better figure out a way to utilize it. I've also deep down been very unhappy with, I have a just uncomfortable feeling is probably the right way to say it, because some of my dad's friends, and I don't want to throw them under the bus, they were very nice people, but they would come on to, with us to deer hunt on some places we had, and then they wouldn't be very excited about having the meat. And then they're like, well, maybe I can give it away to somebody, or maybe I can do this. And I'm just kind of like, well, why did you shoot a deer then? Now, I understand the hunt and all that, but you don't have to actually pull the trigger to have all that enjoyment, right? So that is kind of deeply ingrained in me. I wanted to be better at it. And then I think you and I are very similar in that you were planners, but also I very much like projects. And I see cooking as a project that comes out with a wonderful result, hopefully wonderful, and I like to eat. So, kind of all those came together. And then as I really focused on trying to get better at cooking, I found that I really enjoy cooking for people, and the enjoyment everybody gets from it. And then sometimes I cook some things where I get people involved, and I find that to be pretty exciting as well.
Wow. You have anybody that kind of like mentored you? Grandparent, mom, dad? No, or?
Not really.
So just like your deer hunting, you are self-taught.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I YouTube has taught me a lot in the last 10 years, I'd say. I read. You should see my cookbook collection is huge, and some of them are pretty old. I've got some from back like in the late 80s.
So 1986. I know how my mom would prepare the venison and the doves and the duck. She would not cook squirrel. My dad had to cook the squirrel. She would not cook squirrel.
Yeah.
How were you preparing it back in, the early days?
It was not good. We were overcooking deer steaks. We'd try to fry a few things. I had some cookbooks that weren't very good, and I'd try some various things. Again, I overcooked things. Chili would work.
Chili
was
a mainstay. Yeah. Because it's hard to screw that one up.
Yeah. A chicken fried steak is possible.
And when that was another mainstay for the deer.
Yeah.
And we would have a lot of it made into sausage.
Yeah, sausage or summer sausage or jerky or all kinds of things. My dad once had an entire deer made into jerky.
Nowadays, that would be very expensive.
Yeah, he had a deal with the guy that did this, and I don't think he'd want to see how it was made because it was he was a Native American doing it, I think, in a very traditional manner. And so I don't think he had a lot of, kind of equipment. Probably a lot of it is dried, probably like they did for thousands of years, right? But it's a lot of jerky. And the problem is after you eat about a bag of it, you're like, oh, I don't think I need any more of that,
Exactly.
And it wasn't that it was bad. It was just too much of the same thing,
So we exchanged a few questions earlier today.
Sure.
I'm going to spring a couple on you.
Okay, that's good. I like spontaneity.
Spam. Yes or no?
Yes. Actually, I don't know if you know or not. I mean, this is going to sound like, you're talking about cooking or just eating?
Eating. But cooking too.
I think that this is the next best, like sensation if people were to say backpack food. My food, when I go and I think I've told you I've done about 6 years of Western hunting, and I'm going on my 7th year this year. One of my go-to meals is Spam slice with some mustard and tortillas.
Cold or cooked?
Cold.
See,
it smells like cat food, but it's good.
So my mother we would fry Spam for breakfast, and I love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. I never thought about eating it cold till one day here very, very recently, my coworker breaks out a can and just starts eating it out of the can with the spoon. And I'm like, what are you doing? Shouldn't you cook that first? He was like, no, it's already cooked.
Yeah.
And I had never, ever thought about that. Good.
Yeah.
So we can still be friends because we both like Spam.
Yep.
There was a hunting trip where we had a couple of guys that were like totally against Spam.
I mean, it's just pork.
I would the whole can, I would hide it under their sleeping bag and in their pillow. Anyway, it was we were just having fun with it.
Yeah.
Good.
But Spam slices, you need to try that.
I'll have to try that.
They're prepackaged slices you can carry with you, and they last like 5 years.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Like a little Spam. Yeah. Now, the second question. Our friendship is not pending upon this one. Okay. Chili, beans, or no beans?
Well, I am from Oklahoma. So that's my defense. I like beans in my chili, but
2 for 2, buddy.
Okay.
Me and my sister, we got in almost a fight the other day when I am trying to put beans in. I just put ranch style in mine.
Yeah.
I love
put pinto.
I love ranch style beans. I could eat those just out of the can.
Yep.
Anyway, good.
Yep.
We're 2 for 2.
Yep.
Beans and Spam. There we go. Perfect.
In my chili recipes, I generally, when it comes to the bean adding, then I say, unless this offends the Texans, you can omit it.
I don't know where that came. My mother never said anything about that. I don't know where that came from.
I think it's much to do about nothing.
I think it just gives people to argue about something.
I think so.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I'm glad to see we're on the same page, Chris, on both of those.
Rational minds.
Exactly. Your favorite dish to make? We talked about make and or eat.
Those are 2 different answers, and I'll give you both.
Perfect.
Okay,
Perfect.
So my favorite dish to eat is John Wayne casserole. And I don't know if you... I
haven't made it yet, but it's on the to-do. It's on the list.
It is so simple, and I love it, and I can have it like every week. I have a high capacity for having the same thing over and over again. But it is ranch-style beans, a pound of ground venison, and it needs to be lean, which is awesome because you can make this with anything. Tortilla chips, like a bag of tortilla chips, taco seasoning, and cream of chicken soup. That's it. And you kind of like put a layer of chips on the bottom. You've got your meat and bean soup mixture, and you layer that in. Oh, and cheese.
Lots of cheese.
Put cheese in there, and then you can cap it off with the chips on top. And oh my God, it's a good casserole.
Yeah, when you did that, I think that was like podcast number 2.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm making this.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
But the one that has got me, I've been bragging on you. I haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
But I have an elk roast, shoulder roast that Andrew gave me in the freezer out here, and it's going to be barbacoa.
Barbacoa is awesome.
Now, I'm not making tamales like you did, but I'm going to make some barbacoa out of that.
Yeah. Oh, I'd highly recommend it. Now, it's funny you mentioned tamales because my favorite recipe to make is tamales.
I love some tamales.
Now the reason, because it sounds like it's kind of a sadistic answer because it's a long, hard process to do. What I love about it is we do it over the holidays with my kids and my son-in-law, and we get an assembly line and we make tamales. And I think we made like 65 or 70, and we ate them all.
I know nothing about making tamales. I know all about buying tamales. Around that Christmas time.
Yep.
some of the people that work, their families get together and make them, and I will buy them by the dozen.
Yeah.
I love a good tamale. And you put a little chili on top of it, some cheese.
Good.
It's
pretty good.
excellent.
I would recommend you trying it, though. The hardest part for me is not, making the meat, because you can do it with the barbacoa. Mm-hmm. And making the chili paste is a bit of a chore, but the masa, the dough itself is a bit of a trick. And it took me a while. I think I've been making them for 4 or 5 years. This year, I think I finally kind of perfected it. And the difference was using a stand mixer to get the fat whipped up. But if you're trying to eat healthy, don't watch me make that, because it's got an entire, wad of lard.
Yeah.
Pig lard in it.
Generally, the stuff that's really good to eat.
So I tell my wife, it's a lot of sugar and a lot of butter.
A lot of butter.
A lot of butter and a lot of salt and a lot of things.
It's kind of like that blackened redfish.
Yeah.
Got to use a lot of butter.
You do. You do.
So your favorite one to eat is the John Wayne casserole.
It is.
And your favorite one to make is the tamales.
Yeah.
Good.
Now, do you have a favorite recipe or favorite something to make or that your family makes?
I have 2 superpowers. And I mentioned one of them the other day on social media, and I think my number one superpower is taking new people hunting. Mm-hmm. We've been very successful this last year.
I've seen. You guys have done great.
My second superpower is chicken fried deer steak.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
My wife, my sons, all of my sons will request. I've had it as birthday dinner, as Christmas dinner.
Yeah.
We made some for, we did some elk steaks on Christmas Eve this year.
Yeah.
So that's my superpower. And all it comes down to is my mother, Roger called it a brine. I always just thought it was a marinade, but it's warm water, brown sugar, Worcestershire sauce, a little bit of garlic salt, cut up onion, maybe a little bit of vinegar in there. And you just let them sit in that overnight. And it gives them just this really delicate, sweet, literally because there's brown sugar and Worcestershire sauce in it.
Good things.
This little sweet taste to it.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to have to try that.
It's my mama showed it to me, and I'm telling you right now, everybody in my family loves it.
Okay.
And I, finally, over the years, I have perfected, keeping the batter on and all that.
Yeah.
But that's my superpower. Every hunting trip that we go on, I've said this on several podcasts, it's the Frito pie.
Yeah.
I just make my chili, I freeze it, and it always disappears. So one night when we're at camp and not doing the backpacking thing, we'll warm up the chili and have Frito pie, and I won't say that's a superpower, but that's one that everybody loves.
Everybody appreciates you for that. Do you put it in a vacuum seal bag and throw it in water, or how do you warm it up?
Well, funny that you should mention that, because I had never thought of that until your sous vide.
Yeah.
Never thought about that.
Yeah, because you can just throw it in boiling water.
Exactly.
I do that a lot when I'll be on I'll be truck camping, and I'll bring frozen food like that and just throw it in.
I had never thought of that until your sous vide. Because, I don't vacuum. I have a vacuum sealer. I've never done it. I just put them in a Ziploc, squeeze all the air out, throw them in the freezer.
That works too.
Well, so when we were in Colorado on that 4th season elk hunt, it was so cold that nothing in the ice chest ever thawed out.
Yeah, I believe it.
So when it came the night to cook chili, we had to warm it up in water.
Yeah.
Didn't occur to me what I was doing, but I totally get it now. I could just put it in the water and warm it up, and we'd be good to go.
Yeah, because it only gets to 212, right? It won't get any hotter than that.
Yeah. So that's things that I learned that I didn't even know.
I messed up on that sous vide video. I should have continued the recording after I really ate the steak. Oh my God, that was good.
Was it?
Oh, it was so good. And my wife showed up, and she's like, "What are you eating there?" And I'm like, "Try this." She goes, "Wow." It was just
had never done that, and because I'm thinking, you boil it, warm it up, but then when you talked about putting the sear on it, I was like, oh yeah, you got me. You got me.
Looks terrible when you get it out before you sear it. Yeah. And you're like,
looks like a piece of gray meat.
I'm not eating that. Yeah. But then you sear it, you smell it, and internally, it's exactly that temperature. Now, sometimes you should do it a little bit less, because when you sear it, you could raise the temperature a little bit. But it was just like this perfect medium rare, so tender.
So we're talking specifically game cooking here.
Yep.
what are a couple things that somebody who's maybe new to this, hasn't done a lot of cooking with their game meat, and let's just start, we'll just kind of go down the road. Deer season's ending, right?
Yep.
I got 2 nice big fat does the other day.
Yep.
I went and picked up my half of that cow elk.
Yep.
So when I'm getting ready to prepare those, what should I be looking at? What should I be thinking? Give me some tips.
Yep.
So I don't mess it up.
Well, one of the things, and I know it sounds like you got yours processed, which is cool.
Yes.
Because it doesn't matter. I mean, they need to be taken care of well. And I've started doing mine. Quick side story. I started doing mine when I found a bullet in my chili.
And you're a bow hunter.
Which there are fine processors out there. Do not get me wrong. But I want to do my deer. I want my deer to be my deer, right?
That's always a huge point that you've got to, I mean, you should ask the dude doing your processing. I had the same guy for the last 30 years who's processed all of our deer.
There are great people out there that do this. So I don't want to disparage
But I also
industry.
know that I love Slovakic sausage.
Yeah.
I also know when I take my deer to Slovakic sausage, they measure how much goes in. It all goes in there, and I just get deer sausage coming out. So I know that. I accept that.
That's fine.
But I do, I have processed them on my own. But to me, it's I would rather do it that way. I'm just not set up to do it.
And that's, I didn't always do it either. I started doing it later. So it's kind of like at the right point in my life when I could get the equipment, when my wife started allowing me to bring it into the kitchen, because I did a lot in the garage too, and sometimes it's hard in a warmer climate, right?
Yeah.
But one of the key things I've learned, I think, in the last 5 years that's been the most impact in the quality of my meat is instead of putting the meat directly into ice, I freeze gallon water jugs, and then I have a pretty big coolers, and I'll put as many of those that'll fit in the cooler. And that might be anywhere from 6 to 9 to a really big cooler for like elk. I might have 10 in there. And when I get the meat, I quarter out my deer or elk or whatever the case may be, and I put them in with those ice jugs, right? So no water other than the condensation that comes on those ever comes in contact with the meat.
Okay.
And then when I get home, most of us have, you don't have to, but most of us have an extra fridge, a drink fridge, a beer fridge, whatever the case may be. Because of the grace of my wife, she allows me to do this. I remove everything from that fridge, and I place that meat into that fridge and let it sit there for a few days, and it has a drying effect. Because moisture is your enemy. Moisture and being over 40 degrees is your problem. Because I've heard of microbiologists say life begins at 40. They don't mean 40 years. They mean 40 degrees. Exactly. Yeah. So if you can, and it doesn't have to be long. You need to do at least 24 hours. But if you can give it, 2 or 3 days, it'll kind of dry it out, kind of gets everything set, and the quality of the meat is much better. So that was a big one for me for kind of right out of the gate. I've seen a better retention as I cut the meat up myself. I'll have less loss because if it's wet, it gets gray and it's kind of nasty looking, and I trim a lot of that away, and I have a lot of loss through trim. So that's the biggest one.
I had considered at one point building a walk-in cooler, like a little 5x8 or something out there at the farm, but then I kind of talked myself out of it because I don't shoot that many deer.
Yeah,
our processor's literally 20 minutes away, and he has a 24-hour walk-in cooler.
Yeah. That's really nice.
But now listening to you, I'm like, I have an extra refrigerator that I could dedicate to that.
Yeah.
And I could start this whole thing.
I put a bull elk in mine. It was tight fit, but I got one in there.
I mean, I have it's sitting out in my dad's shop with drinks in it.
Yep.
It would be no problem.
Yeah.
I need to do some more thinking on that. All right, so get it cold.
Yes, get it cold and keep it dry as possible.
Yeah, dry as possible.
Because I'm not a fan. There are people that do it, but I'm not a fan of throw it nice, drain the water, and kind of recycling, because it bleeds a lot of stuff out, and you're just kind of got this pale, tasteless meat.
I have heard people talk about doing that with feral pigs.
Yeah.
But anyway, not venison.
Right.
Okay.
So that's kind of one of the key things. Once you get to the point that you're talking about where you've got the meat and you're starting to think about cooking, one of the most important things is don't overcook your meat. Now, there is an asterisk by that. If you have wild pigs, if you have bear, you better cook it to the temperature that's safe for that meat for pathogens like trichinosis.
And you need a thermometer.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't just go by the way it looks. You need, because you do not want.
You don't want trichinosis.
You don't want that.
You don't want to, be like Steve Rinella and end up eating a little rare bear.
Yeah, don't want that. Have you ever had bear?
I have not. It's on my list. I desperately want to go bear hunting, but my problem, and you can probably empathize with this, is I only have so much time away, and my focus has been elk.
Mm-hmm.
And now I've had a couple of years of success with elk, and now I'm starting to think hard about mule deer, but I do want to do a bear trip.
I have thought about bear, and we were talking Arizona earlier. You can do an OTC rifle bear in Arizona.
Really?
Yes.
I did not realize that.
Yes. Spring bear.
Yeah.
Now it's all spot and stalk, which you and me would be great with.
Yep.
Something we need to talk about.
Yeah. I think the density there is pretty low.
Yes. Success is low, but hey, we're scouting a new spot, or we're scouting areas that we've already been, hey, you're learning.
This is part of my retirement plan. I'll be doing every season, So.
That's what my buddy Curtis was talking about. He goes, yeah, here next year I'll have all the time in the world.
Can you imagine?
To go do, well, he'll have to divide it between fishing and hunting, but.
That's a tough decision.
It is, but those are like problems I need.
Yeah.
I'm willing to take those problems on. What am I going to do today?
Now, you brought up a really good point that I did want to make, and I'm glad you reminded me. A thermometer will help you be a better cook.
Okay.
And so what do I mean by that? So I was raised, my mother and I are both germ phobes. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, historically, we have burned stuff to death when we cook it. So our hamburgers, just beef hamburgers, would be like hockey pucks. Our steaks would be well done. Mm-hmm. And over the years, and just, learning and running into other people and learning from other people, came to the conclusion that I think beef is, especially a steak, better to be like medium rare to almost rare. And deer steak, oh my God, do not cook that past medium.
Yes.
It is not fit to eat. And that's really the reason a lot of people have been unhappy with their deer steaks is this is tough, it is dry. Well, you cooked it too much.
Yes.
I don't know if you've ever. There's a YouTube video that I saw with Hank Shaw. You know who Hank Shaw is?
I know who he is. Yes,
he's
sir.
like the saint, the patron saint of wild game cooking, and he was doing a video on cooking ducks for one of the state wildlife agencies, and he was kind of explaining how you can like push test. He was using his thumb and middle finger.
Yeah, just going down the row,
and pushing on that kind of the fat part of your thumb at the different. As it touched different fingers, and he's like, so that's rare, and you'll know that's rare on your duck. This is medium rare. This is medium. And then he came to well, and he goes, this is what well feels like. Don't do that to ducks. If you like well done, don't hunt ducks, is what he essentially said. And I would say the same thing for deer is don't have a deer steak. Grind that meat up into something if you're not comfortable and you need it to be cooked more thoroughly. And a big thing to me, too, is at the point you either make the order with the processor or you process it yourself, you need to be thinking ahead a game plan. Mm-hmm. How do I want to prepare this? If you don't want to do roast, and roast are kind of a big commitment of time to defrost them and to cook them, don't do a bunch of roasts if you're not going to cook them, right? Now, there is the argument, well, I can grind those up later.
Or I can cut them into steaks or whatever.
Well, I could paint my house, but that doesn't happen very often, right? It's like you need to do it at the time. Quite frankly, and because we're all like in a fast-paced life, and availability is a big thing. So making those decisions up front, and if you have a thermometer, you can control that temperature better, and you can verify, that you're at the right point. And then because the window for landing that temperature on a wild game is so small because of the leanness of the meat. If you do it on a pig, there's so much fat in there, it doesn't matter, right? You've probably done a pork shoulder before and smoked it, right? You really can't screw that thing up. I mean, if you did it like a 400-degree fire or something like maybe. But on game, there's such a small window, you need to be able to measure that, and it takes some practice. So people need to also accept there's going to be some bad outcomes sometimes, and they're going to learn.
Well, yes. And like I said, the steaks, you're spot on there. I'm right there with you. The roast I like doing in the slow cooker anyway.
Yeah.
But we do a lot of ground meat.
Yeah, I do too.
And I loved your tip about that. And I thought maybe you were going to go there too when you're talking about getting it processed.
Yep.
Decide whether you want them to add the fat into it or you could add the fat into it later.
You could do it later, yeah. There's a lot of versatility with that.
A lot of the deer we shoot there at the farm, they're farm deer.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like they're in Oklahoma. They were pretty dang fat anyway.
Yeah.
And so we didn't put a whole lot of fat with them.
Yep.
So we either add to it, and like I sent the text to you, Roger hit me with this up last year, where he just puts a little bit piece of his pan sausage in with his hamburger meat.
Yep.
And he uses that for the fat. And it gives it a little seasoning too.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's deer.
Yep.
Let's talk about birds. Duck.
Yep.
Dove, quail.
So all, similar to deer, they're very lean, and you've got to make sure you don't overcook them. Like turkey is a good example, right?
Yes.
If you had on a table in front of us a farm raised versus a wild turkey, they are two different specimens, right? I mean, the amount of fat and just the sheer size of a commercially grown turkey is just bizarre. In fact, those turkeys that get pardoned by the president right before Thanksgiving? There was a news special I saw one time, and they went to the farm where they go, and it's empty. And you're like, well, what happened to them? Well, they all die because they can't. They grow so fast and they're so fat that they don't have a very long lifespan.
Yeah.
But those wild turkeys that we hunt, those dudes are lean machines. And so if you try to cook one whole, like you'd see like a perfect Thanksgiving dinner, right? Yeah. If you cook the breast all the way through, then the thighs and the legs will be done, like way too overdone, and it'll be too dry. You're really better out to part that bird out and cook it separately. Quail, I grew up eating it fried, which would make my wife just insane. But that breast on a quail is a little bit easier. Dove is pretty approachable as well. I am still learning on ducks. Ducks is something that when I was growing up, I didn't have much of an affinity for. I was overcooking them.
Oh, yeah. But I remember my grandfather shooting mallards.
Yeah.
I can remember sitting in the truck and seeing my grandfather sneak down into this little patch of woods where we knew there's on the farm that he had his cows on.
Yep.
And he would sneak in there, and then you'd see the ducks fly off, and you hear a couple of shots, and he'd come back with a couple of greenheads.
Yep.
And I hated them. She'd put them in that, everybody remembers that roasting pan, like that blue enamel roasting pan that Grandma had.
Yep.
And she'd put them two ducks in there, and you might as well chew on the bottom of your boot.
Yeah.
But I guess my grandpa loved them. I don't know. Or maybe he thought that's what he needed to do. I don't know.
I think it's out of obligation, probably. But, what I have learned a lot on, because my friends, and I'll give the credit right here to Joel Smith. He's the one that really has turned me into a duck hunter. And he didn't need to do that, but out of his goodness of his heart, and he gets a lot of joy into introducing people into duck hunting. Took me out, and at first I was like, "This is crazy," because I had to get up at like 1 a.m.
This is nothing like deer hunting.
No, and then we're tromping out in the marsh. There's mosquitoes, but it's pretty cool when you get the decoys out there and the birds come in, and so that was the first, kind of like, this is really cool. Then I was like, oh, well, now I'm going to clean them and cook them just like I do everything else. Well, what I didn't realize was the different breeds of ducks, you need to handle them differently.
They taste
vastly different. So I didn't realize, diver ducks, don't keep that skin on them unless they've been eating rice or something, right? And the dabbler ducks, are pretty good, but also again, look at the fat on that. So I've learned quite a bit, but I'd say now I'm a pretty good cook on the duck breast himself. And it's really, and this is again the Hank Shawism, he's like, it's a steak with a hat of bacon. So that skin on there. Yeah, he's all about also not overcooking it. So you put that down on the skillet with a little bit of grease underneath it, and with the skin side first, and let that do most of the cooking. And he even instructs you to push it down because it'll kind of cup up. And most of your time will be spent on that side. A little bit of time on the other, and you're getting a medium rare. Yeah. And you've got to be comfortable with that. And sometimes some of these ducks have rice breasts. Have you come across that with some pathogens in it? If you have those, or not pathogens, they're parasites. Yes. But I don't really like eating those. But if they don't have those rice breasts in them, I like eating them medium rare, and they're really good.
The favorite recipe that me and my boys found was taking those duck breasts, cutting them in strips, and using a fry daddy and making steak. It's like steak fingers.
That's a good idea.
And they absolutely love them. I mean, my mother, we would always put them in like that. Remember the roasting pan?
Yep.
Of rice. So, rice, some cream of mushroom soup mixed in there, and just laid the duck breast in. It wasn't bad. No. But we did that with ducks. Yeah. We did that with dove.
Cream of mushroom soup is the major ingredient in most wild game cooking.
Exactly. Yeah. So, we talked about deer, talked about birds, fish.
Fish are a little bit easier for most people, I think, because a lot of people fry them, right?
Exactly.
I try to do, my wife is really into health, and she doesn't like fried things. So I try to come up with things that are different. I'll tell you what, my favorite preparation for redfish is the initial grilling, right? And you can do it on the half shell, it's fine, or I'll do it on foil if you take the skin off. But it's a little bit boring just for us anyway, just to eat that fillet. So what we generally do is then I'll take that and I'll mix it with some grilled peppers and onions, and then we'll have fish tacos.
First time I heard fish tacos, I'm like, no way.
Yeah.
Yuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not so much anymore.
No.
I love them.
And the day after, I'll make fish quesadillas, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. A little cheese, too.
Just add the little, what was ever left over from the other one, huh?
Yeah. Well, generally what happens is, I know there's like a 3 fish limit, but I'll generally get 1 or 2 fish I'll keep, right? Because that's kind of and my wife will eat one side of a good redfish, and then, but I'll cook both sides, and the next day I'll use the other side for the next meal for the next day, and I'll do like quesadillas.
Nice. What are your tips on the meat care for fish?
I don't think it's anything outrageous. I do like to soak it in a little bit of salt water. And depending upon the fish, some fish it matters more than others. You kind of draw out some of the blood and impurities, and I think it just makes for a little bit better starting point on that. All an extreme, and I know you and I both like to fish for this kind of fish, white bass. Some people don't want to touch white bass with a 10-foot pole, and I don't understand why. I think they're great. If I'm going to do a fish fry, dude, those are to me, those are perfect. I agree.
But I pan seared them, just on the stovetop, and they're delicious, and they make great fish tacos.
They do.
So, yeah. You can catch a bunch of them.
Yeah. They fight hard.
Yes.
It's at the time of year,
it's coming
when you're not doing anything else. So
it's coming.
I think it's great. I love it. But I do also like one that I'll have to do on a podcast is this Veracruz recipe. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's a kind of tomato-based kind of mix in a pan that you'll cook the fish in, kind of poaching it in the sauce, and it's got like tomatoes and olives and other things like that in it, and it's just kind of I think it's a Mexican or Spanish dish, one of the two, probably Spanish all the way back. But it's a way to kind of do a non-fried recipe with a lot of flavor.
Ceviche.
I am not a fan.
Not a fan of it?
Of ceviche, but that is very much a personal choice because, again, if you refer back to my earlier comments on the germaphobe, and
I could totally see that because the first time I heard of it, I'm like, no.
Yeah, I'd like a flame to be run under my. If it's raw, that's bait.
I've tried it.
Yeah,
and I like it, and my family loves it.
I'm sure it's good, and my wife loves it too. But I'm having a hard time to get over it because I think I've cleaned so many fish with parasites.
Yeah.
That's really what's keeping me from it.
The other one, and you probably heard it on the Meat Eater one, was the ceviche now guy hard.
I did hear him say that. Yeah.
No, we did that one. With,
I can see that,
and it was really good.
Yeah.
So I would do that again. But anyway, just kind of out there.
I'm on a food journey, and I wouldn't have eaten or done the things that I'm doing now when I was 20. And, I'm in my early 50s now. So maybe by the time I'm 60, I'll eat ceviche. I don't know. I'll probably get to the point where
Well, I used to say when people would mention sushi, that's bait.
Yeah, that's what I say.
I love a little bit of sushi.
It's got to be good. Everybody loves it. My family loves it.
It's pretty good stuff. Yeah. And, being a redneck Texas boy, would have never touched the stuff with a 10-foot pole. But, hey,
I'm trying to have an open mind. And I've lived abroad, and I know that, people do things different ways, but it's like there's a lot to be learned, about that, about different approaches. Because what we're used to is just because that's the way we were raised, right? So,
what's the craziest thing you've ever eaten?
Oh, that's a tough one, Cary. I have.
Let me mention a couple of mine, and you can say yes or no.
Yeah.
Crickets?
No, I've seen them, but I've not ever tried them.
In an open air market in Korea, they had crickets.
Yeah.
We ate crickets.
I can believe it. And I think today I would probably do it, but
they were cooked.
Yeah, they're fried.
Or fried, but they just were a little crunchy.
Yeah.
Dog.
Yeah, that would be hard to swallow.
Again, in Korea, I've got a picture of like a meat market with the little meat shelf.
Yep.
And it's the quarters.
Yep.
And there's still the paw on the end
their
of
heart. I just couldn't know how to do that. But I tell you what, it came to mind, and I don't think it's that exotic, and it was damn good, is rattlesnake.
Never tried it, but I hear people all the time.
It's really good. Where I'm from in Oklahoma, there's a town nearby called Mangum, and they have a rattlesnake derby. They used to, anyway, and they would serve it, and it was one of my favorite dishes. Wow. It was really good.
Monkey?
Oh, that would be hard, too. I don't think I could do that.
No, I've never done that.
Yeah.
They do it in the Philippines all the time.
Yeah. So I know it's done, but no.
Yeah, when you mentioned abroad, I just wondered, what was out there. And I'm not afraid to try anything once.
Right.
And as long as it's good, I'm usually down for it.
Unfortunately, I have a nut allergy, and I have to be careful about what I eat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so that can become difficult with some Asian dishes and some Indian dishes. And I love Indian food because I like spicy food. So, I'm always trying to make all of my dishes hot.
Let me ask you a question here, because I've never got and maybe you don't know, maybe you've never tried it. Aoudad.
I haven't tried it yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I do definitely want to. But I've heard people say it tastes like a boot.
Yes.
I don't really take any of those things that people say for a truth, because there are so many other wives' tales. Pronghorn antelope. I've heard people say they are.
That was my next question.
I've killed 3, and they are some of the tenderest, best meat I've ever had. But I think people don't take care of them. Mm-hmm. They also have a lot of this kind of oil on their hair, and if you get that on the meat, I think that'll also taint it.
Yeah, I had 2 little notes here on my as far as keeping, far as prep for your game.
Yeah.
Things to do. Number 1, you already mentioned it. Cool it down as quick as you can.
Yeah.
Number 2, keep it as clean as you possibly can.
That makes a huge difference. And it's hard to do. I mean, it takes a significant effort, especially Western hunting, and you're cleaning the animal on the ground and then just try to keep it clean. Oh, my God, it's hard. But it can be done.
And then, just hanging it up, letting it cool.
Yep.
Do all that. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and these guys were talking about early season elk hunting, and they were worried about it was going to be, it was like 50 or 60 degrees during the day and 40 or below at night.
Yep.
And they're like all concerned about it. I'm like, come to Texas, shoot you a whitetail, or shoot you a now guy, even in January. When it might be 90 degrees, I'm like, y'all boys are way overthinking this.
I'm afraid that we've all been kind of conditioned to think that if something sits out for 30 minutes, above 40 degrees, that it's gonna go bad. Especially from a live animal to kind of a finished product. When that animal goes down, he's at about 100 degrees, right? He's got to cool down, and you're not going to get to 38 degrees within 30 minutes, right? It's going to take a day. And, that meat, I mean, we've been doing this for thousands of years as hunters and gatherers, right? That meat gets kind of a hard layer, a crust on the outside that's a protective layer. If you get it out, get it dry, get it hung up, if you can keep the bugs off of it, that is a difficulty. And it will actually keep. I've seen, people put them in shade or in a low spot in a ravine, and you'd think, oh, that's going to go bad. It is fine. And I've also seen recovery of animals overnight the next day and still be okay as well, because it was a good cold night. Yeah. Might lose a little meat around the joints, like the hip joints is kind of a bad spot for heat retention.
Yeah, it's a big chunk of muscle in there.
Yeah.
Doesn't dissipate that heat very well.
Yeah.
Just keeping it clean and cooling it off goes a long way to having a better tasting product. I asked you about Aoudad.
Yeah.
Because I've heard exactly what you have heard.
Yep.
And I have shot an Aoudad, and we didn't take the whole. We just took the head because I was like, oh, it's not going to be worth it. But I'm kind of in the same camp you are now. I'm kind of like, it's probably got some. I mean, there's nothing that just tastes like absolute.
Well, this is something, because I think when people say something's gamey, it gets under my skin, because I think that people are saying everything should taste like beef or chicken.
No.
Or domestic pork. Let's face it, these are kind of close in the neighborhood, but they have flavor, they have something to offer. But don't be disappointed when you try to cook something like beef or chicken and it doesn't turn out like beef or chicken. An aoudad is tougher, and you're probably not going to make, like a ribeye steak out of it. You're probably going to do a slow cook, something like a barbacoa. Maybe ends up in barbecue, or maybe, barbacoa is more kind of pure and you can still kind of get the taste of that meat. But something that is focused on the attributes of that animal.
But he's a sheep.
Yeah.
So, all these other sheep that we eat.
Yeah, you don't cook them like a ribeye steak. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think being focused with what are the tendencies, or what are the the details is what I'm trying to think of a little bit drier. They have a certain profile. They lend themselves to certain recipes. So if you push it out of those bounds, don't be disappointed with the results, right? So take a little time to understand kind of what you've got and try to prepare it in a manner that it's going to give you the best results.
I think that is great advice right there. Just look at what you're cooking.
Right.
And there's some things you're just not going to be able to make out of that.
Right.
And there's some things, like I said, it lends itself really, really well to whatever it is.
Yep.
I think that's just the way to go down it. Just figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's always nice to, look, this is what I look for coming from you, is things I have never thought of. Things that, that are out of my normal chili, deer steak,
right.
whether I do it on the grill or we do it, however we do it, I'm looking for things to expand my horizon.
Yep.
However you want to, whatever. But
I am starting out kind of on the early podcast with some of the basics.
And I think that's great.
And I'll kind of build from there. But to your point, I'm a curious person. I'm always trying to learn and expand and try new things. And some of these I'll try like for the first time on the podcast. And I may go down in flames, but we're going to learn together.
Being from Oklahoma, you ever ate a raccoon?
I have not, but I hear they're great.
Well, I've heard that.
Yeah.
And if we need some, I've got some big corn-fed ones there at the farm. we could set this, because I hear people talk about barbecuing them.
Yep.
So anyway, I
had opportunity. Back in the fur boom in the 80s, my dad and I would do a lot of trapping.
Yes.
But it never crossed our minds to try to eat one of those. Be like, really?
I look at the ones under the feeder. I've been doing some night hunting for some of these hogs.
Yep.
And I'm like, that's a small bear.
Yeah.
I mean, they call them trash pandas for a reason. He's a small bear.
He looks like it too.
Anyway, we were talking about
only in the last couple of years have I actually started eating feral hogs actually.
Yeah.
And I've been severely impressed.
What I have seen, I've butchered some.
I'm selective.
The fat.
Yeah.
The fat has just been like crazy.
Yeah.
And then I found some that like didn't have an ounce of fat on them.
Yeah. I've been selective as to which one I'll shoot and which one I keep, because hogs are a nuisance. Mm-hmm. But I still but I still want to try to utilize that, and so some early experimentation with this, I've been really happy. Now, they were younger sows as opposed to a big boar, but I actually did like pork shoulder. Now, I did 2 pork shoulders together, and I had to do the Texas crutch. And if you don't know what that is, for the people who are listening, that's wrapping it in foil after you smoked it for a little while to retain the moisture. Mm-hmm. And I put 2 sticks of butter in there.
That'll do it.
So you need to put some fat in because it was really lean, but it came out beautiful.
Wow. We've done just because this is the way we're doing it, is shoot one of them, feral hog. Mm-hmm. And the way I was taught, and what they called it, was the poacher's cut.
I've never heard that.
Never heard that?
No.
So you cut him, you split him right down the back.
Okay.
Lay him open. You pull the back straps out.
Yeah.
Then you cut down both of the back of the hams, and you debone the hams right off of the back.
Okay.
And that's all you take.
Huh. So, I actually like the front shoulders are pretty good.
With the pigs, you're missing out on the front shoulders.
Yeah. Unless they got like a big loss from the shot, but sometimes I'll try to hit them in the head so I don't screw up the shoulders, because I think the shoulders make really great tacos.
Well, there's certainly great things to cook. And now that I look at this, and when we were doing Andrews the other day, I asked him, I said, do you want the shoulders? Mm-hmm. Because they would still doing it that way. Mm-hmm. It would be a gutless method.
Yeah.
That you could just relatively pretty quick, recover all that meat.
Yep.
And not have to mess with the whole thing. Because I remember the day we would string them up like a deer.
Yep.
And if you've never skinned a pig, it's nothing like skinning a deer. You literally have to cut every piece of skin off of him.
You need 2 knives and a guy sharpening one of them.
Exactly. Now, I guess I think I saw a guy one time that had a winch set up to the floor, had a cable, and he jerked the skin off of one. But
I've done that with deer before, the golf ball method.
Yes, but he had it set up, and it must have been a pretty good sized winch to pull that skin off of that pig.
Yeah.
Anyway, only way I've ever done it is cut it off.
Yeah.
And like you say, they will certainly test the sharpness of a knife.
Yes, they will. They got so much dirt and everything in their hair too.
It's tough. Kristen, Andrew's wife, when she shot that one, I guess she'd never seen that was the first feral pig she'd ever killed, and she got up close to it. She's like, "Oh my God, look at all this hair on it, and it's not even pretty hair."
Yeah. They are not show pigs. No,
no, they're not.
No, this is a very different animal.
They were quite different.
Do you have any tips in the kitchen?
No, I really don't. I mean, like I said, I've got a few things that I like to cook.
Yeah,
I am really good at following a recipe.
Yeah,
so that's whether it's
like a project, man.
Whether it's baking, whether it's baking or whether it's something else.
Yeah.
Like I've got the Meat Eater's Cookbook.
Yep.
Getting that Hank Shaw cookbook.
That's a good one.
So I'm really good at following recipes.
Yep.
So I'm looking at expanding. That's how I got into what I found out with the fish tacos. It's not necessarily the fish. It's that green sauce that goes with it.
Yeah, or seasoning.
Yeah.
Dry seasoning also is really good. Like I was telling you about Kent Rollins. He's this cowboy chuck wagon cook that has a YouTube channel, and he sells a seasoning called Red River Ranch. And I use that on a lot of things. I use it in my fish tacos. Is really good.
Okay, Red River Ranch.
Yeah,
I have to go.
That's
I have to go find
twister.
That one. Yeah, but I'm really good at following recipes.
Yep.
So that's what I'm looking forward to. So somebody looking for you. Obviously, Wild Vittles Podcast. Is it now? What is the actual Instagram if they're searching for it?
The Instagram is Wild Vittles Podcast.
Okay,
and then the podcast. At first, I told it was just Wild Vittles, and if you put that in, you'll find it. But I worried about like the search algorithms, and so now it's Wild Vittles. Is it colons of 2 dots? And behind that is helping everyone become a better wild game cook. I think is what it is, because I wanted to have the wild game cooking in there. In
your I guess we'll call it a thumbnail. It's a cooler with a bunch of stickers on it with a red bowl and a deer antler sticking out of the red bowl.
That's right.
So great looking little logo. I love that.
Thank
you.
I love that. My original idea was to have a big bowl of chili, mounded up with cheese and jalapenos and everything on it, and coming out of it 2 antlers. And the logistics associated with that, I was like, but I hate to waste a bowl of chili for that. It's like I'll get some Wolfman chili or whatever that is and put that in there. I may still do that someday, but that was kind of spur of the moment. I think I can pull this off and make that as my logo. Was my idea.
I love it.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere else that they can find you?
Right now, it's those 2 places. So the podcast is everywhere podcasts are found. I've finally got it distributed everywhere. Instagram is great, so you can DM me or leave comments to be able to tell me what you think. I am very interested because as we talked about, I think at the beginning and some offline, I don't know if the cooking on a podcast is going to be what people want to hear. But I think there's still a message there, and I think that there's some content that maybe I need people's feedback to help know what's the best method. Because it could be conversations like you and I are having about cooking.
So we're videoing it with your phone.
Yep.
You're currently doing video and audio.
Yes. Sorry, I missed your prompt there. I do have YouTube.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Yeah. So very new at this. I'm less than a month so far, but. And I joke that the only person probably listening is my mom. So hi, Mom. But I do have YouTube as well, and it's called the Wild Vittles Podcast. Yeah. Now there is another account called Wild Vittles. They have not updated since 2016, and it was about foraging. So you have to put the podcast piece in there, Wild Vittles Podcast, and then you'll find me.
So you can listen to it audio while you're driving in your truck, like I do 99% of the time.
Yeah.
Or if you're one of those millennials or whatever, they're listening to or watching podcast on YouTube.
Yep.
You've got that. I just don't hit that crowd.
Yeah, I understand that too.
And
in both of those, I'll have in most of these things, not all of them, some of the simpler things I haven't put a link, but I'll put a link to the original recipe, because not all these recipes are from me. They are from people that I admire and utilize theirs, and I want to give them full credit for that. Some of them are my recipes, and I'll put them then in the notes so that people can follow along. And I intend to kind of continue on this journey. I'm going to give it a try for about a year of just a kind of a mix of recipes of different, game and cook along kind of live cooking sessions. And then I want to also talk to some of these cookbook authors and ask them about, what are their tips, and try to learn from them, because some of them are just such good cooks and they produce such beautiful food. And I'm anxious to kind of try to share that, because my mission is to stop wild game waste. I want to make gamey cool, and I want to make everybody a better wild game cook, because I see that as the back half of the circle, if you will. I mean, everybody's focused on, I want to get that elk, I want to get that deer.
Now what?
Good for you. What do you do with it when you get it? And I don't care if people process it themselves or if they want to give it to a processor. When they get that meat back, what are you going to do with it? And can you utilize that deer in the time that you have until the next season? And I see it as a bit of a challenge about, you need to utilize it almost every week. Right?
Yeah. You've talked about this on the podcast.
Yeah. 50-pound deer, an average a pound a week, right?
We figured out that we will, me and the wife, 4 deer a year.
Yeah.
I need 4 deer for us to make it to the next deer season.
Yep.
Because anything that, we love to eat it.
Yep.
We still buy, I did buy a ribeye the other day.
Sure.
But
there's nothing wrong with that, because I'm not against, I was raised as a farmer and rancher, right? And so I'm all about eating beef or eating chicken or pork is great. But if you're going to go hunting, if you're going to go fishing, we owe it to the animal, to wildlife, to conserving this, and not taking more than our fair share. We need to consume that animal. And I also think that's a good governor. And what I mean by it's kind of like a governor on a motor, right, or accelerator of, well, if you've got a lot of something, maybe you ought to work on utilizing it before you go get more, right?
Exactly.
It's just kind of natural common sense. And I don't want to offend anybody. I'm not calling anybody out. But I just know that I've seen people that don't really have the tools to be able to cook their deer meat. I saw a guy, bless his heart, on Facebook for one of these lakes around here. And the reason I was on there is because they were talking about white bass. And some guy was offering like 24 white bass that he had frozen solid with the guts in them.
Why? Why would you do that?
He didn't know what to do with them. I don't think he had a
great
lazy. He had a great time cooking, catching them. He was proud to show them to everybody, but he didn't know how to do the rest of it.
He should have just thrown them. Anyway,
I agree. But I think there are a lot of people out there that just need tools and the approachability, and it's kind of daunting. Kind of like I've heard you talk about it. I've experienced it too. The first step of hunting out west, that is a big first step to take. You don't know where you're going. You don't know how to hunt this animal. You don't know what you're doing. I see the similar circumstance around cooking, and that, I don't know, this thing, I've heard bad things about it. I don't know if my family's going to like it. Everybody's kind of predisposed against it. I'm trying to work against that. Appreciate that meat for the flavor that it has. Use recipes that will give you a great result, and don't try to force it into something else. Now, having said that, there are some domestic recipes that you can use for wild game, but just know you need to add a little more fat, or you need to make sure that you cook it medium rare.
Yep.
So with the right tools, a little guidance, we can all be really good wild game cooks.
Well, with this cooking podcast, it lends itself really, really well to the YouTube crowd.
Yeah, that's true.
Because, you get to see the whole, and we want to see the process, right? We want to see start to finish, right?
Yep.
And you're able to do that.
Yeah.
Whereas, not necessarily some of the stuff that I do or we do lends itself to that, or we want to show all of our hunting spots and fishing spots, right?
Yeah.
But this is one thing that, after the fact, that we're all into. If we've taken the game, we, like you say, we owe it to them, and you should. My mindset always has been, except for predators, if I kill it, I'm eating it.
Right.
And I'm not going to kill anything that I'm not going to eat.
Right.
So that's just kind of my thing. Any thought? Now, you said about the recipes. So the recipes right now live on the show notes of the podcast.
Correct.
Any thought about ever having a website where you would have perfect?
Yeah, that's coming.
Because that's where I was kind of thinking. I was like, in my mind, I would think, well, I could go to the Wild Vittles podcast and I could look at all his recipes and like, oh, we're going to try this one tonight.
Yep.
You know, if I needed to know how to do it, then I could go listen to the podcast or go check the YouTube out.
Yep.
It's kind of where my mind went with that.
I'm headed there. But like I said, under a month in, and I'm videoing things with my iPhone so far. I'm just kind of I'm bootstrapping this thing, right?
I understand. I totally understand.
Slowly. But I'm learning quite a bit along the way. I think I shared with you some of the video editing is like very daunting, but I've learned a tremendous amount in just the last month.
Well, you know, this is episode 175. January started our 6th season, or 6 years doing this podcast.
I don't think you know it, but you're my podcast mentor. So
I appreciate that. I'm humbled by that. I have helped a few other people along the way. And like I said, it's just like anything. If there's anything I could share to help you along the way, I am totally about that.
Yep.
The big thing that I'll tell you, and I don't see you doing this because I said we're a whole lot alike.
Yeah.
Podcast fade. It's a thing.
Yeah, I've heard it.
You know, they say like 7 to 10 episodes and you never hear them again.
Yeah.
But I don't see that. I don't see that being a thing. You're too passionate about this. There is nobody in my realm that's talking about this.
Right.
Dude, I think you got it.
I hope so. There's one or two reasons there's not very many podcasts out of there. One, nobody's kind of focused on it. Mm-hmm. Two, nobody wants to listen to it. So we'll see which of the two it is. I'm not sure.
As many hunters and anglers that are out there.
Yeah. And
because we all like to eat.
Yep.
Dude, I think, I don't know. Maybe you just found the niche.
I hope so. And I'm trying to be extremely focused. Yep. But I, and I'll talk a lot about deer, but I will go on to ducks and fish and turkey and other upland birds, kind of as the opportunity presents itself. Mm-hmm. One of my friends, James, he and his brother got a mountain lion.
Oh, wow.
With dogs. Mm-hmm. And I think it was in New Mexico. And he's offered me a cut. And he's like, what cut do you want? Do you want to have some of that on the podcast? I'm like, absolutely.
Yes. Because I've, again, heard that it's delicious.
I have too. I've not tried it.
I've not tried it.
Yeah.
I've heard that bobcat's pretty good.
Really?
But again, never tried it.
Yeah. It's kind of like bear, though. You got to make sure those dudes are cooked. So it'll be a slow cooker.
I'm sure. So,
yeah. With a thermometer.
Anything else about the Wild Vittles podcast that we need to know?
I think we've covered it. I'm still trying to find my way to figure out what's the right mix of how to share information in a method in a manner that I think people will be entertained and educated. And so I do invite people, if they've got comments, please let me know. I do appreciate a rating would help. I know you say the same thing. I would appreciate a 5-star rating, but if you don't think that I deserve one, let me know what you think I can improve upon.
What's the best way for somebody to reach out and make contact with you?
Right now, I'd say that probably through Instagram.
Just DM you through Instagram.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, but it's fine to put, comments on posts on Instagram or even, that's probably the best way. Yeah, I think so. I think you're right.
So you're listening to this podcast, give his a listen. Go check out Chris's YouTube and send him some comments. If you've got some ideas on what you think that he's doing well or what he could improve on or where he should go with this, give him a little feedback.
And it's Vittles with 2 T's. So Wild Vittles, Vittles.
Chris, thank you for stopping by here this evening.
Thank you, Cary. I really appreciate your time.
It's great to see you, and I will certainly let you know how Arizona goes.
I'm looking forward to hearing about that.
All right, guys and girls, thank y'all for tuning in. Like we always say, if you're getting out there kayak fishing, I hear that down in South Texas, the white bass are already starting. I hear.
I'm excited.
I know that it'll be rolling here come next month. We'll be good. Always wear your life jacket. If you're still out there hunting, practice safe gun handling. All right, we'll talk to y'all guys and girls later.
Thanks.
Bye.
I want you to know it's over.